I've been making ambient music now for about 4 or 5 years, and it's been an incredibly steep but enjoyable learning curve. And I continue to learn. I'm always looking for ways to enhance my creativity, find new musical techniques, and make music that I enjoy, but also that I hope other people will enjoy and will help them to find rest and peace. That's really the heart behind my Raphah project. And recently I've seen quite a few videos circulating on YouTube and various other places asking the question, what would you tell a younger version of yourself? In other words, what advice would you give to someone younger or less experienced or just starting out on their journey, not necessarily in music, but in all sorts of different areas of life? And so I wanted to, in this video, address that question and come at it from two different standpoints. Firstly, and more briefly, whilst I understand the sentiment behind the question, I think in many ways I wouldn't want to go back and tell myself, my younger self, too much, because I wouldn't want to deprive my younger self of that opportunity to experience, grow, learn through testing, through trying things, through being experimental, because it's in that process that you actually, I think, learn the most. However, if I were to go back and speak to my younger self and give some advice to help with that process and that learning journey, I've picked out 5 different things I think I would say. And hopefully they will help you too if you find yourself at the beginning of your ambient or indeed any musical journey. The first piece of advice I'd have is to be yourself. Be genuine. Be who you are. You have a unique set of skills, gifts, talents, abilities, knowledge and experience. So lean into that. No one has that set, and so that's going to make you unique. It's going to make you stand out. Now, in music and in creative arts, there are lots of different people who are very talented. They do very well, they're very successful, and particularly in the age of social media, where it's very easy to get drawn into comparison, looking what other people are doing, how well they're doing, what type of music you're making, and seeing that as a way to success can lead to a bit of copycatting and thinking, well, if I just do it like that, or if I just sound like them, if I appear to be like them, that's the route to success. But I think that just leads to mediocrity, because A, you're not going to be able to do it as well as them, and B, it's not going to come through as something genuine in not just your music, but the relationships that you are building with other artists, perhaps record labels, distributors, anyone else involved in your musical career. So just be who you are. No one else can do that. You do you, let everyone else do them. On a similar subject, write music that you like, that you enjoy, and that comes from your heart, because that will shine through in what you're creating. Whilst I know that there's place for writing to a particular brief, for a commission, for sync licensing and various other things, I think unless you believe in the music that you're producing, unless it excites you and it comes from within, if you're trying to sound like somebody else or achieve a particular goal or aim in terms of streaming revenue or other sort of metrics, it's going to drain the life out of your music. The second piece of advice I'd give is to build relationships. This is so important, and something I didn't really appreciate before starting out on my journey of making ambient music. Ambient music in particular, I found, has the most incredibly supportive, encouraging and mutually beneficial community of any group of musicians that I've ever worked with. I think it's quite unique, but I don't think it should be. I think this should be across all genres of music. What I love about the ambient genre is that everyone's cheering each other on. Everyone's willing to help out, to give advice, to work together, to help us all create something that we can all share with the world and be proud of. And over the past 4 or 5 years, I've made some really good friends from all around the world, some of which I've not met in person, but that doesn't necessarily matter, although that would be great to do sometime. But that for me has been one of the most satisfying, rewarding and enjoyable parts of making music, because I'm not doing it in a bubble. I know there's people that I can reach out to for advice or to work with, to stretch my creativity. And so if you're starting out on your musical journey, make relationships and keep those going and build them, because they will reap rewards, not just in terms of musical success, but in terms of the depth of enjoyment, because it's all about people. That's why we're making music ultimately, is to share with the world. So go and do that. The third point is something that I touched on in a previous video, which I will link somewhere, and that is just to use what you have. And it's very tempting to get drawn into spending a lot of money on instruments, equipment, plugins, instrument libraries, patches. And whilst those things are good and helpful, they're not necessarily going to help you make better music. You're the one that makes the music, and all of those things I've just mentioned are just tools to help you to do that. So again, if you're just starting out, if all you have is a laptop and a pair of headphones and a MIDI controller, just use it, go with it. Learn that, and then when you're ready to upgrade or you find something you really need, then go and buy that. Because the music will speak for itself, and those tools will just help to refine and enhance what you have already got. The fourth piece of advice I would have is to start and finish. And what I mean by that is that you can have the most incredible musical talent, you can have such inspiration and creative ideas, but if you never sit down and commit to recording those, no one's ever going to hear them. You're not going to be able to share them with the world. And so, in order to make progress, you've got to dedicate yourself to actually getting those ideas down, recording and starting the process. We can get caught up in the trap of planning and dreaming and scheming for how things are going to look. But unless you actually get down to do it, it's never going to happen. I am a bit of a self-confessed procrastinator, and so that is a bit of a discipline for me, and I think for many other creative people. But once you've started, that's only half the process, because you then have to finish what you've started. If all your ideas are nicely recorded, but they're sitting on your hard disk, again, no one's ever going to hear them. So I think what is even more of a discipline is to finish off those ideas. Finish the project you're working on. Set yourself deadlines if you have to. But I think most importantly, particularly if you're a bit of a perfectionist, is to get to the point where you decide that's it, it's done. I'm not going to fiddle anymore. The EQ is fine, the balance is fine, the instrumentation is good. And a question I always ask myself before I commit to releasing something is, do I like it? So I'll leave the project, I'll leave the track a few days, I'll come back to it, I'll listen to it with fresh ears, and if it stirs something in me, if I sit there thinking, yeah, do you know what, I really like this, that's a good test for me that that is ready to go out. Are your tracks always going to be perfect? Of course they're not. I still listen back to lots of my music with a critical ear and think, oh, I wish I'd just adjusted that, I wish I'd included that, I wish I'd moved that here, I wish I'd EQ'd that differently, I wish I'd compressed that slightly more. But you could do that forever. And so at some point you just need to make that decision and finish what you started, get it out there into the world. Because the likelihood is those little things you hear in your own music which you are critical of, nobody else will ever notice and ever think about. I'd also add here on a related point that I've often released music that I've spent a lot of time on. I've really carefully crafted. I've really invested energy and enthusiasm into, and I'm certain once I've released it, that track is gonna go big. People are gonna love it. It's gonna be my top streaming track. And once I've released it, it does okay, but it doesn't really fulfill the potential I think it had. And yet at the same time, I've released other tracks which have taken me an hour or two to produce. I've not really invested that much, and I've put it out there and it's flown. So the amount of effort you spend on a particular piece of music doesn't always correlate to its success, which is an encouragement, because if I hadn't released those couple of tracks which have done really well that I've not spent much time on because I thought, well, they're not really ready, I never would have experienced that particular success. So just go for it. And so the final piece of advice that I would give to my younger self, if I could go back and tell myself what to focus on and what to do when starting out in making ambient music, and that is to develop your craft. Try not to stand still. And that's going to involve trying to keep practicing your instrument, getting better at playing whatever you play. For me, that's primarily guitar, but I've improved a lot playing piano, and I've also picked up a couple of other skills playing other instruments through this ambient journey. It's quite easy to get absorbed in the creation, the production, and the technical side of that and neglect your musicality. So if you can, try and do something to constantly improve your musicianship and your knowledge. My wife bought me a small little lyre harp for Christmas. So my New Year's challenge is to learn how to play that and expand my musical horizons. So don't stand still with your development, but at the same time, try and develop other areas as well. Particularly music production. That's something that I've completely taught myself, and I'm getting better and better all the time. I still get frustrated because there's lots of things I can't do and think I should be able to do. But there are so many good resources, particularly on YouTube, so many good people on there who are giving their advice and their wisdom and their technical know-how to help you to improve in making better sounding music. So add that into the mix. Don't neglect your practice, don't neglect your musical development. So that's the advice that I would give if I could travel back in time 4 or 5 years and have a coffee with my younger self. Those 5 things are probably what I'd pick out as being the most important. Now there are others, and if I were to do that, we'd probably end up chatting all day about music, and my younger self would have all sorts of questions for my older self, most of which I probably wouldn't know. But hopefully those points are helpful for you, whatever stage of your musical journey you're on, whatever genre you're in. That's not limited to ambient music, that's just the type of music I create. So if you found this video and you create thrash metal, then these would equally apply to you. I'd love to know what your thoughts are, if you have any different advice that you would give your younger selves, or perhaps you would take the approach I had at the start of the video where I said I wouldn't actually tell myself too much because I'd want to go through that process for myself and have that learning experience as well. Either way, leave a comment, all the rest of it. Otherwise, I'm hoping to do one of these videos every week and include some different things, do some more demonstrations as to actually how I make music rather than just walking around the fields, walking my dog, so you can see how I actually put these things into practice. But thank you very much for your time, thanks for watching, and I hope to see you soon.